Now, I just want to say that I usually do make my bed before I film these, but the cat won't move, and I just don't have the heart to move him, so I apologize for that for the one person who cares. I'm mainly going to be reviewing The Devil Inside today, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the film with the worst title of all time. I can't even remember the fucking title half the time. But it was a great movie. I really loved it. It's very well written, has a compelling plot, very little filler. I mean, that surprises me because most slow burn suspense movies, which this is, they're usually brought down by unnecessary subplots. And, there's usually some sort of love story and that kind of stuff. But even though there may be implications of that here, it never really focuses on it too much. And it's just always about the story. And it was very interesting. Great twists, great dialogue. The characters were all interesting. The acting is great. I mean, this is the best I've seen Gary Oldman in years. And it's funny because one of my favorite movies of 2011 was this Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but one of my least favorite was Red Riding Hood, which had Gary Oldman too. But it was just an all-around well-made spy thriller, very low-key but nevertheless compelling. And if you haven't seen that, I strongly recommend you check it out. Now for a movie you probably shouldn't bother to see, The Devil Inside. First off, before I get into it, I did not hate this movie. I thought it actually, in some ways, was almost good, but it's more frustrating because it doesn't reach that level of good. You expect more from it, and it makes its mistakes more blatant. But when I first saw the trailer for it, I thought it looked pretty interesting, but at the same time, I don't know what it is, but every exorcism movie reminds me too much of The Exorcist. When I, for example, watch a slasher film that's clearly been spawned from the success of Friday the 13th, I'm not really bothered by that. In fact, I enjoy it, probably because I enjoy slasher films. But like when I watch The Burning, for example, a blatant Friday the 13th clone, even though it's similar in concept and maybe premise, it's very different in execution. Or even zombie movies. I mean, every zombie movie pretty much that's ever been made past 1970, whatever, is ripping off Dawn of the Dead. It steals plot devices from that film. People often forget that zombies before Romero came along were not anything what they are like now. But I rarely watch a zombie film and say, oh, well, Dawn of the Dead did that first. But whenever I watch an exorcism movie, I'm always comparing it to The Exorcist. The Exorcist was so definitive that you can't even play it at its own game. So I figured with this Devil Inside, it could turn out to be okay, but at the same time, The Last Exorcism already did the whole found footage and Exorcist hybrid. So what could this movie do? Then the reviews came in, and everybody hated this movie, and I figured, yeah, I'm probably going to hate it too, and it's kind of dismaying because while I'm okay with found footage films, I used to complain about them in the past, but then I realized that for the most part, they've yet to make one that I really hated. I liked the Paranormal Activity sequels more or less. I liked The Last Exorcism. Even Apollo 18, which I thought was very uneven, was still pretty creepy at times. And even the lesser efforts like Diary of the Dead, which I enjoyed when I first saw it, but I didn't enjoy as much when I saw it again later on. It has its moments, and I don't even think The Fourth Kind really counts, but I thought that was a pretty bad one. But I figure that the most boring movie in the world is going to be a found footage film because, we've been lucky with our found footage films, and that's a very, very subjective way of saying it because people do hate Paranormal Activity and The Last Exorcism and all those types of films because they bore them, but they don't bore me, and I figure eventually there's going to be one that's going to really bore me, and unfortunately, The Devil Inside was not that movie. It's not a good movie, as I believe I said earlier on in this review, but it does some things, I think, pretty well. For one, I really like what they do with the characters. One thing I think with exorcism movies they really struggle with is how could they be true to the Exorcist mythology or exorcism mythology and so not make it too Hollywoody. Like a priest, for example, most Christians believe would never ever be under the threat of possession. Most exorcism movies do have the priest becoming possessed at some point. But usually when they do that you always wonder, where is God in all this? They focus so much on the devil portion, but where is God? In this film, I felt it was where the priests became vulnerable was that they are in fact not doing this exorcism for the most purest of reasons. One guy's more interested in his job, and the other guy's, he has an ego that you really shouldn't have in this type of thing. But they're fundamentally good people, but what you feel that whatever malevolent force is behind all of this is really exploiting their weaknesses, and it makes the characters, I thought, I'm using a cliched term here, multi-dimensional. And I really appreciated that. And I felt really this film's greatest sin in many ways is that it doesn't flesh that angle out enough. I think this movie could have been much more compelling if you focused on these guys' paranoia. They've realized that they stumbled onto something they really don't understand. And that could have made it more different than most of these types of movies too. But on the other hand, it also kind of rips off The Last Exorcism. Well, okay, it doesn't rip off The Last Exorcism, but The Last Exorcism already did what this movie mostly does, and I thought it did it better. Also, this film kind of lists plot devices from The Rite, which I thought was kind of weird, because that only came out, I think, last year. And I don't know if I'd say it's better or worse than The Rite. Yeah, I guess I'd say The Rite is a little bit better. But so you're still not getting anything original here. There's a lot of scenes that do feel lifted from The Exorcist 2, as one would expect. And the first half is pretty slow and boring. I was sure that I was not going to like this movie at first. Because, with Paranormal Activity, it is much about, the building dread. But this one, you don't really feel that until later in the movie. Even though there's one good jump scare with a stupid dog that really caught me off guard. But once it gets going, once it starts gaining momentum, I was really interested in it. I thought where they go with the plot, even though many people thought it was kind of confused and it derails from the main setup, I thought it was still very, very intriguing. I was completely into it. The scares I thought were very well framed and staged. And, once it started trying to really be scary, I thought it was pretty scary, but it also has some unintentionally funny parts too. Like the first possession you see is on you're watching video footage. I laughed. That was pretty funny, and it wasn't supposed to be. But for the most part, I thought it was pretty edgy and pretty intense. But then the ending comes and completely screws everything up. Now, endings in horror films are tricky to pull off because I think we all know how most of these movies are going to end. Like once we hit around Saw 4 or 5, I was like, why do I care? These people are all dead anyway. And then when they die, it's like, oh, who cares? But with this movie, I thought it did a decent job at making you guess. You don't know where it's going to go, but how it resolves itself is completely unsatisfying. And I'm not spoiling anything or anything, but if I were to compare it to the ending of The Last Exorcism, not that it's the same in content or anything, The Last Exorcism had an ending that I wouldn't say was bad, but it felt very out of place. It felt like it belonged in a different movie. With The Last Exorcism, it was produced by Eli Roth, and it felt to me that, for the most part, Eli Roth let the director tell a story, but then Eli Roth suddenly got this idea for an ending where he'd do some sort of throwback to 80s cult films, and it just felt silly and out of place, but still, I wouldn't call it bad, just it was in the wrong movie. In this one, the ending is just lazy. Maybe they ran out of money. Maybe they just had no idea how to end it and they ran out of time. But the ending is very, very frustrating and unsatisfying. And with a lot of these films, I think it is really all about the ending. For example, would people have liked Paranormal Activity as much if it didn't have that shocking, scary ending? And so with this movie and its crappy ending, I think that kind of reflects the rest of the movie for a lot of people because they hate the ending so much they hate the rest of the movie. And I can't really fault them for that either. Like I said, with a lot of these types of movies, it's the ending that really makes it. So I guess my final consensus is that The Devil Inside is not I wouldn't say it's as bad as what everybody's making it out to be, but it does have some really bad moments. But it also does things that I wish they do more in horror films. I like the fact that it does try to flesh out its characters, and there are moments I thought were pretty creepy. But It's not one of the better found footage films. I'll say that. I think it's more akin to Apollo 18 in that it's really uneven, but it seems like people are really noticing the bad parts and aren't affected by the good parts in this one, because almost everybody hates it. I think I'm like probably the film's biggest fan, and even I don't think it's that good. I'm going to leave you with this, though. High expectations are film's worst enemies, but low expectations are their best friend. And with something like, I don't know, what was the movie I was disappointed in? I guess Paranormal Activity 3, because the reviews were pretty good. I had higher expectations for that, and it didn't meet those, so it seemed like I was more pissed off at the movie. But with this one, I had really low expectations, and it turned out to be a little bit better than I expected. So if you want to read my written review, just check links in my description. I would say this is a good rental if you like found footage or exorcism films, and if you want to go see it in theaters, yeah, you might as well just do it at your own risk. And that is all. I think this weekend I'll have a best and worst list finally up. Hopefully. I was supposed to have it up today, and this was supposed to come out like 2 days ago, so my bad. I'll see you guys later.